ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of HearSay Shorts. I am your host, Maxwell Ivey. I am a 59-year-old Caucasian male with medium-length brown curly hair and brown eyes, wearing a burgundy button-down shirt with a black tie, in a kitchen chair recording from my bedroom. I have retinitis pigmentosa or RP with only light perception. And today I'm very excited to get to speak to Ken Kunken. And he is the retired deputy bureau chief from the Nassau County District Attorney's Office. He broke his neck while playing football in college, but went on to have an extensive and successful career as a district attorney. And he's also a very powerful motivational speaker. Ken, welcome to HearSay Shorts, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Max, and thank you for having me.
Well, I really appreciate it. So you broke your neck playing football in college. Could you talk about how that changed your worldview and your plans for the future as a result of the injury?
Well, I got hurt in 1970. At the time, I was 20 years old, and had just started my junior year in college. So I don't know if I could say I had a worldview back then. I was just concentrating on completing my studies and trying to make it through 4 years at Cornell University.
Yeah, very challenging university for people of any abilities, much less someone dealing with the changes caused by having a severe traumatic injury like you did.
Right. Well, just so you know, when I broke my neck, I severely damaged my spinal cord. So as a result, I'm almost totally paralyzed from the shoulders down. So I know when you talk about accessibility, I had the added misfortune of being injured more than 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act took effect. So when you talk about accessibility, the first thing that comes to my mind is physical accessibility. There were very few ramps or curb cuts back then, so just getting around in public was very difficult.
And I imagine since it was difficult getting around in public, there were even less people who looked like you that were seen in people's daily lives, which had to make things even worse.
Well, I'm quadriplegic. I don't remember seeing any other quadriplegics out in public back then. You didn't see many paraplegics either, because you just couldn't get around well in a wheelchair. There were architectural barriers everywhere you went, so it was extremely difficult.
So talk a little bit about the challenges of being in the legal profession, having that being your career, both before and since the advent of all this digital world we live in now.
Okay. When I went to law school, I was able to complete law school in the standard 3-year time period. I passed the New York State Bar exam the first time that I took it. I began my work at the Nassau County District Attorney's Office by participating in a very extensive 4-week training program that taught us all aspects of trial techniques from a prosecutor's perspective. And then I was so proud to go to court my first day, and I couldn't fit through the swinging doorways in the courtroom to get to the prosecutor's table. The doorways were too narrow to allow me to get through in my electric wheelchair. So when you talk about accessibility, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. With respect to digital accessibility, I did not have a laptop computer back then. They just weren't around. I mean, getting access to a computer was really difficult after I was hurt. We used to have to key punch cards and get a couple of seconds on a mainframe, a very large computer in a big room to have any time on a computer. So I had virtually no access for many, many years after my injury.
So I remember it as, and we've talked about this, we both have challenges while they're different. I can remember the days when instead of machines like we have now, you had terminals and you had dedicated screen readers. So there may be one computer a blind person could use. But I never really thought about, not being able to physically get to have access to a computer because of your chair.
Yeah, that was just part of the problem. I couldn't even get on the computer, but I had difficulty even turning pages of a book because I cannot use my fingers or my hands. I have special splints that, with a great deal of difficulty, I could try and turn pages of a book, but even that was difficult. So getting help in the courtroom was extremely difficult.
So you had challenges before the internet and digital technology. What are things like nowadays when it comes to all the computers and the net we depend on?
Well, they've improved a great deal. As for me, I have a Bluetooth device connected to my wheelchair that, with just a slight movement of my left arm, I could move the mouse up, down, left, right, and actually function on a laptop computer, even with the limited movement that I have. So now I could actually do legal research on the computer. I don't need somebody to pull books from a law library. um, and I could do regular, exploring the internet, seeing what's new with respect to the news, all by just moving the joystick on my wheelchair. So it's come a long, long way. In addition, some of the devices have voice control. So some of them I can regulate just by speaking. So it's a huge difference from when I was first injured.
Okay, so let's get back to the next question on my list here. After your injury, what did you think about your potential future for work, or what was your ability to find jobs at that time?
When I was undergoing rehabilitation, it seemed the best the medical personnel thought I'd ever be able to do would be to someday sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. And at that time, they were rotary telephones, not even push button phones. So I wasn't sure I could even do that. So I had a lot of questions about whether there was anything I could do in the work world.
And obviously, over time, you've proven that you had a lot more within you than the people at that rehabilitation clinic could see.
Right. Well, I was fortunate that I had a lot of help every step of the way, from family, from friends, from classmates. And I was able to go back to school, complete my undergraduate degree in engineering. But then I decided that what really looked like a more viable field for me would be to go into a field where I'd be counseling individuals. So that way I'd be more using my voice than having to rely on anything technical. So I continued my education. I earned two master's degrees with respect to counseling, and I worked for a couple of years as a vocational rehabilitation counselor.
I imagine you not only helped your clients, but you probably educated your fellow caseworkers quite a bit just by being around you and seeing you do this job.
Yeah, I think they were very surprised. One, that I was able to just go back and complete school, but then in addition, that I could not only work and work well. When I first looked for a job as a rehabilitation counselor, here I had two master's degrees, and everybody still felt I was just too disabled to work. So I had to look for a job for a year before I found one organization willing to give me the chance to show what I could do. And that organization was Abilities Incorporated, which is part of the Viscardi Center here on Long Island. And they hired me to work as a vocational rehabilitation counselor.
Well, I think that leads us into the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is what would you tell employers about hiring individuals with disabilities?
Well, a number of things. One, that it's so important for them to keep their expectations high, because people's performance often rises and falls based upon what others expect of them. People with disabilities can accomplish an awful lot if given the opportunity to show what they can do. And I might add that people with disabilities are often some of the hardest workers and most creative individuals when it comes to dealing with questions or problems in the workplace. And I think people with disabilities can have a profound effect on everybody around them as well, for the better. It motivates and inspires others around them as well as people they deal with on an everyday basis.
Yeah, it looks like we're just starting to get some research not only on the productivity benefits of having disabled people on a team, but also on the emotional benefits.
Absolutely, Max. I might add that in our office, when we leave the job, we go through what's called an exit interview. And during that exit interview, the ADAs are asked what part of the job they liked the best and what part they felt could be improved. And I was told that on a number of occasions, people have indicated that the best part of their job was meeting and getting to work with me. Now, I must say, Max, I'm not saying that to boast or brag. I know they weren't talking about working with Ken Kunken per se. They were talking about meeting and working with somebody with a significant disability on a daily basis. Because unless they had a close relative with a disability, they rarely had day to day contact with somebody with a disability. And for some, it was a real eye opener. And they told me that, it's helped motivate and inspire them to do more with their lives. In fact, the office has now even started an award in my office called the Ken Kunken Award, given to the outstanding assistant DA each year who demonstrates the great work ethic that they believe I've demonstrated in the job. And I believe that's a tribute to people with disabilities in general, that it's a real eye opener to so many people how hard and how well somebody with a disability can work.
Okay, given your vast experience as an attorney in public service, what would you want people, what would you want to tell people about digital accessibility?
Well, it helps so many people in so many ways. It just opens up avenues that were previously closed to people with disabilities. I mean, now, as I indicated before, you don't even have to go to a library to get a book out or to learn more about any topic. It helps in so many ways, and it exposes you to so many different areas you were never exposed to before. And in addition, you can do a lot of work at home. And I think people learned during the COVID epidemic that people with disabilities could not only work and work well, but demonstrate for others how you can still work from your home if need be and perform all the tasks needed in a job.
Well, that brings up a question in my own mind that I wanted to talk to you about. And that is, would you agree with me that by forcing so many people to go back to working in offices, that business owners and other organizations are robbing themselves of a lot of potential great employees because of the logistical challenges of going into an office?
Absolutely. There's so much somebody can do from their home these days, especially because of digital access. And as a result, a lot of time is saved with respect to commuting and getting back and forth to the job or other areas you may need to go during the work hour where you don't have to do that now. Digital accessibility has opened a whole new world to so many people, and particularly it's given access to people with disabilities.
Okay. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the future of accessibility, both digital accessibility and in person physical accessibility.
Well, as I say, it's opened so many doors for so many people. Now you really don't have to wonder whether something is accessible or not. You can find out well ahead of time just by going on the internet or, by exploring with respect to computer accessibility almost any questions you have about any topic in the world. And you don't have to leave your home office to go anywhere to be able to function and help in the workplace.
That's a good point. We can find out a lot about the physical accessibility of a restaurant, a bar, an arena, or a hotel by visiting their websites or reading reviews from other people with disabilities before we ever have to leave the house.
Max, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you do it with your visual disability?
I appreciate the invitation, but I don't travel much. I prefer to follow my local sports teams and listen to them lose on the radio as opposed to paying the tickets to go to the stadium. But yeah, there is so much more we can do. As I joke with my friends, if I had been born 50 years ago, my options would have been selling magazines, tuning pianos, or begging on street corners. So, I mean, the internet, digital accessibility have changed a lot of things for the better. And COVID was like a golden age for us in many cases because everybody else was doing it the way we wanted them to do it, correct?
Right, right. We were used to doing things from home, but most people weren't.
Yes, I told people who asked me how it felt to be isolated about how I had been isolated for years, that the only real difference was now I had better choices in my delivery options.
Huh.
So back to the question about physical accessibility. I talked to people who mentioned that there's the minimum basics of things like cutouts and door access, but there's a big difference between access and truly being able to visit a business the same way or with the same enjoyment as somebody who doesn't have a disability. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to have access to be able to get into a building, such as I gave an example. I was able to get into the courthouse, but had difficulty getting into the courtroom to get to the prosecutor's table. So one of the problems was my office was on the second floor, and the elevator was often broken and not functioning. So access physically for me getting around was very difficult. But when I first started working at the DA's office, there wasn't computer access to get to the law library, to be able to do legal research that way. So that's come a long way. Now you can do that all from the computer and you don't need to physically go there. Access could have meant being able to approach the bench when I was a trial attorney to discuss a legal issue with the judge and the defense attorney when I had difficulty just fitting through the railing between where the lawyers were functioning and where the judge was sitting. And physically, it was difficult for me to do so. So there were so many access issues in my functioning as a lawyer that have improved a great deal. I mean, now even our grand jury room in our courthouse was made accessible, where somebody in a wheelchair could not only work as an attorney, but also as a witness, be able to get into the witness box or the jury box because there were ramps to both.
You know, that's interesting because I can imagine a time when attorneys would have excluded someone with a disability, thinking they weren't competent to listen to the arguments in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've come a long way.
So my final question is, I know that you are a great motivational speaker. What are some of the topics that you speak to people about? What are some of your main subjects?
Well, as I indicated before, one of them is not to set limited expectations for yourself as well as for others, because there's an awful lot you can do. And I encourage people not to listen to the naysayers, not to listen to people that tell you can't do something because it is just too difficult. I want to get across the message that Just because something has not been done before does not mean you cannot do it now. Because you really have to challenge yourself to get involved and stay involved in as many activities as you can. And it's so important to participate. Don't just sit back on the sidelines waiting for somebody else to do something. Good things come to you when you work for them. And it's only when you're actively involved that you have control over the outcome.
Well, Ken, I really enjoyed speaking with you. Do you have a few final words of wisdom for our audience?
Well, participating in activities not only helps you, but it helps others as well. There's an awful lot a person with a disability can do to not only make their lives better, but to make the lives of others around them better as well. And somebody with a disability, I think it's important to let people know we have the same needs, desires, and wants as everybody else. We are no different. There's a lot of things we can do to help others, to earn our own way, and all we're looking for is the opportunity to show what we can do.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on HearSay podcast and sharing some of your valuable experiences with us.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for this opportunity.
You're very welcome. And for those of y'all listening, thank you for joining us, and we will see y'all next time. HearSay Shorts is produced by Sojin Rank, Mike Barton, Mariella Paulino, Missy Jensen, and Max Ivey, and is edited by Alex Dorrier. If you enjoyed the podcast and don't want to miss any future episodes, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.